Hey, friends, and welcome back to the Portable Books podcast. I am LaShawn, your host, and I am coming to you from Iced in Atlanta, where the storm of the century mainly passed us by. But for now, we are still stuck in the house because I live on a hill and it's ice, and well, all the schools are closed anyway. So that left me with a lot of time this weekend to read. I flew through three books this weekend, a new to me romance author that I'm already itching to read through their entire backlist, an arc for a new Nora Roberts book that comes out later this year. It was good. And I finished a book that we will talk about later in the podcast that was actually on my TBR. So clap for me because the first two were definitely not. But most of that was to escape the real world news that Alex Preddy had been murdered in the streets of Minneapolis by ICE agents. There is video from several angles. There is no question of anything the end. As someone sitting here trying to figure out how I can help, how I can make a difference or change, I decided that it would be through books. I really believe that reading is political, whether we mean it to be or not. What we read, what gets published, what gets taught in schools, and even who has access to books in the first place. All of that is shaped by who has the power. So yes, reading can be cozy and personal and comforting, but it's also bigger than that. Books shape how we see the world, how we see other people, and how we see ourselves. And that's really what this podcast is about. Loving books, yes, but also paying attention to what those books are doing to us and the world around us. Sometimes choosing a book, talking about it honestly, or questioning what we've been taught is a small but real act of resistance, at least in my opinion. So, with that in mind, today's episode is about 5 books that I think you should read in times of resistance. Not because books magically fix everything, they don't, but because they help us name what's happening. They help us feel less alone. They remind us that none of this is new, that people before us have faced brutality and censorship, displacement and fear, and still found ways to survive, to organize, to love, and to imagine a better world. These are books that tell the truth. These are books that challenge those in power and ask us to look at the world and ourselves a little more clearly. Some of the books on this list may make you uncomfortable, will make you angry, and hopefully all of them will make you think. At least that is the hope. So let's get into it. Book number 1 that I want to share with you, of course, is Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. I feel like I am always telling someone to read this book. I think I've mentioned it on this podcast several times. Set in a collapsing America, this one feels prophetic almost. 15-year-old Lauren Olamina lives inside a gated community with her preacher father, family, and neighbors, sheltered from surrounding social chaos and anarchy caused by climate change and economic crisis. In a society where any vulnerability is a risk, she suffers from hyperempathy, a debilitating sensitivity to others' emotions. Precocious and cleared eyed, Lauren must make her voice heard in order to protect her loved ones from the imminent disasters her community stubbornly ignores. But what begins as a fight for survival soon leads to something much more: the birth of a new faith and a startling vision of human destiny. All I got to say is just read that one. It is still amazing to me this day how scarily accurate she was when she wrote that book. Like, I think I read an interview one time where she was like, it wasn't really that. It was more she was just looking at patterns. But I want that gift to just look at patterns and have this come out my head. The next book is called Citizen, and it's by Claudia Rankine. It's part poetry, part essay, and it's all a look at what it means to move through the world in a body that's constantly being read, questioned, and of course, misinterpreted. And the author writes about everyday racial aggressions that pile up over time, like in classrooms, in stores, online, in the media, and even in sports. and how that accumulation shapes how safe you feel, how visible you are, and whether you feel like you truly belong. It's a book about citizenship and memory and the emotional cost of surviving in a so called post race world. I just discovered this book and I'm listening to it. So that's why I had to share it. The next book on my list is George Orwell's 1984, which is a reminder, I feel like, how language is manipulated, how truth can be distorted, and how people are trained to doubt their own eyes. Sound familiar? Does it sound familiar? Unfortunately, 1984 by George Orwell is still relevant. It takes place in a world where the government doesn't just control what people do, it controls what they think, what they say, and even what they remember. The story follows Winston Smith, an ordinary man living under the rule of the party and its figurehead, Big Brother, where everyone is watched and even private thoughts are treated as crimes. Winston works rewriting history, changing old records so that the government is always right. As he starts to see how dangerous that is, he begins to quietly resist in small ways, writing in a diary, falling in love, imagining a life where people are free to think for themselves. But in a society built on surveillance and fear, even hope is risky. And at its heart, 1984 is a warning about how power manipulates language and truth, and how people can be taught to doubt their own memories, and how easily freedom can disappear when obedience is sold as safety. I just want to pause and be like, every time I turn on the news lately, I think about this book. It's another one of those things where you're like, this cannot be real life. It cannot be. The third book on my list is How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley. I think I talked about this late last year when I was reading it. It shows how the collapse of democracy rarely looks dramatic at first. It looks ordinary. It sounds reasonable. It hides in familiar phrases about tradition and safety and getting back to how things used to be. Make America great again. Okay, I digress. I digress. As a child of refugees who fled fascism in World War II Europe, Stanley writes with the knowledge that most of this really isn't theoretical. He breaks down the patterns that appear again and again and again when societies start to turn on themselves, when propaganda is dressed up as truth, and hostility towards education, obsession with hierarchy and control, and fear around gender and identity, and the steady division of people into us and them. Drawing on what's happening in the United States and around the world, he makes it clear how quickly dangerous ideas become real policies and how easily neighbors become threats. Yeah, we're just going to sit with that. We're just going to sit with that. The fourth book on my list is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. It shows a world where freedom doesn't disappear all at once. It fades quietly, replaced by comfort, distraction, and the idea that thinking too deeply is dangerous. The story follows Guy Montag, a fireman whose job it is to burn books, because books make people question things. And in this society, in the book, questions are a problem. People are encouraged to stay entertained, not informed, to forget, not to remember. Bradbury reminds us that censorship doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like choosing what's easy over what's true. And that by the time people realize what they've lost, like their voices, their history, their ability to think freely, it is, in fact, already gone. Yeah. Yeah. These are the books that I think, yeah. Those are the books that I wanted to bring to you today. Each one sounds eerily. When I was picking them, I kept saying each one of these sounds eerily like the present, not the past or not fiction. And that's scary. And that's why I chose these books. So anyway, okay, friends, let's move on to happier thoughts and let's talk about what I'm currently loving reading and getting ready to read. I listened to one of my favorite book podcasts yesterday, Book Talk for Book Talk, and they gave a wonderful list of independent bookstores in Minneapolis area that you can support. They spoke with the owner of Kama Bookshop in Minneapolis to talk about what's going on the ground in Minnesota, the community response, and how local activists and organizers are supporting one another. I will leave a link in the show notes to the episode because I think it's a really, really good resource if you want to support through bookstores. Currently reading. I just finished reading Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy. Listen, this book was an absolute train wreck. The entire time I was reading the book, my skin was literally crawling. Waldo, our main character, was fascinating, selfish, your typical insecure teenage girl, high maintenance, highly inappropriate. You will not like her. Like, literally, her choices and the way her mind works. I spent the entire book either cringing and wanting to beat her ass, excuse my French. But at the same time, she was a victim by her neglectful mother who just wanted to call Child Protective Services on for pure neglect and emotional manipulation. And by Mr. Corgi, who was her typical abuser, manipulator, middle-aged man saying all the things that he needed to say to manipulate the young girl into an affair because she is emotionally young. She is a child and he is an adult. I spent most of the book cursing him out. I literally did not like not one character in this book. But the book moved fast. I thought about it when I wasn't reading it, but I did have to put it down several times because I was just so disgusted with Waldo, her mom, and Mr. Corgi. But mainly, I think that it is, at the end of it, I think it is a measure of a good writer when you can load the story, all the characters, and the situation, but find that it would be a crime not to give the book 5 stars. And I cannot tell you how much I hate that I had to give that book 5 stars. It was so good and so bad. And it's such a conundrum to me because the subject matter was just awful. I saw a lot of people online say it was vulgar. And I'm like, okay, that's not the word I would use, but parts of it were very vulgar. Like it's descriptive. It's very descriptive. And there was like one section where I literally was like, the hell am I reading? Like, what the hell am I reading? And it's one section where I wrote down exactly what she said. And I was like, I sat there because I was like, I had to write this down. And then I had to read it back. And I was like, the hell? But like I said, it would be a crime not to give this 5 stars, like a literal crime. Anyway, I am currently reading If I Ruled the World by Amy Dubois Barnett. That is out today, January 27th. It's set in 1999. This novel follows Nikki Rose, the only Black editor at the prestigious fashion magazine, who walks away after being told her voice and her audience don't matter. She takes over Sugar, a struggling hip hop and lifestyle magazine, and is given 6 months to save it. Thrown into a world of ambition, excess, and nonstop pressure, Nikki must prove she can lead while building a magazine that actually reflects on her community. At the same time, she's forced to deal with a powerful former boss and her lover who is determined to take her down. So, with the help of loyal friends and unexpected love, Nikki has to decide what success really means and what she is willing to do, what she is willing to claim. No, what she is willing to risk to claim it. I just started this one. It has such a nostalgic feel. I came of age in the 90s. I graduated from high school in the 90s. I went to college in the 90s on a HBCU campus, and this feels like that time, if that makes sense. Like the 90s had a very specific feel to them. And I really feel like this book encapsulates that. Like it really, I don't know how to describe it. You have to read it if you were alive and over a certain age in the 90s, like not that you were born in 92, but if you were actually aware in the 90s, like you were you're millennial and above, then you will get this. You will get this about the 90s. It literally it's just a feeling. And I am really going to get into this book probably tonight and hopefully be finished with it soon. Let's just say I was mad that I had to put this book down and record this podcast. Next up on my list to read is The Seven Daughters of Dupree by Nikisha Elise Williams. It also is set in 1995 in the 90s, and this novel follows 14-year-old Tati, who is determined to learn the truth about her father and her family's past. But her mother and grandmother refuse to talk, leaving her to piece together a history shaped by silence and unanswered questions. As Tati searches for the truth, the story moves through generations of Dupree women, tracing their lives from the early 1900s through the civil rights era and beyond. Bound by a family legacy of loss, secrecy, and survival, and a mysterious belief that they will only give birth to daughters, each woman carries the weight of choices made long before she was born. This novel is a powerful story about inheritance, memory, and how how the past lives in the present. So that is it. So that is going to be when I finish the first book, that's going to be my second Kindle book. Physical book right now, I am determined to finish Our Vicious Oaths. I've been saying that for months, but I'm going to actually get back to it. And I'm not allowed to read another physical book until I finish that one. And what else? For my audiobook, like I said, I am listening to the one that I talked about earlier. And for my audiobook, since I finished one book, I'm going to, like I said earlier, I'm going to finish up Citizen by Claudia Rankin. There is another book. It's nonfiction. Take it with a grain of salt with me in nonfiction. You know how I am. But after that, I am trying to decide if I'm going to listen to Fire, Sword, and Sea by Vanessa Riley, or if I am going to listen to, what was the other book that I was going to listen to? I can't remember right now, but I'll probably be reading that one. Burn Down Master's House. So we'll see. Who's that by? Clay Kane. Yes. So one of those will be my next book. And that is all, friends. I am getting ready to go downstairs and warm up dinner. And going to feed my starter because I'm making some sourdough this week. And that is all. That is all I have for you today. Next week is the start of Black History Month. It is February, and I have plans for all month long. So stay tuned every Tuesday for a Black History themed episode. Yeah, I'm kind of excited about that. So stay tuned. As always, if you enjoyed listening, I'd love it if you would follow me on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And if you have a minute, please think about leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or sharing the podcast on your social media. It helps us to grow and find other bookish friends. If you'd like to connect with me, you can email me at pornovabookspod@gmail.com. And you can also connect with me over on my personal IG at LaShawn Wiltz, or on the podcast IG, which I really have to start doing more with, Pornova Books Pod over on Instagram. Yeah, that might be a quarter two endeavor, but hold me to it, y'all. Hold me to it. Okay, friends, that is all I've got. That's all I've got. I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.